This is really what you need to understand if you want to understand psilocybin and how it works and how to make it work optimally for a given condition or goal. You have to understand what it's actually doing, and what allows psilocybin to do fairly specific things in comparison to serotonin, even though psilocybin and serotonin are so similar, is that psilocybin mainly binds to and activates the so-called serotonin 2A receptor. The serotonin 2A receptor is one of, again, many different serotonin receptors, but serotonin 2A is expressed in particular areas of the brain and even on particular areas of neurons in the brain that allow for very specific types of changes in neural circuitry to take place, not just when one is under the influence of psilocybin, but afterwards as well. So really, in order to have a useful discussion about psilocybin, we need to talk a lot about the serotonin 2A receptor. But fortunately for you, unless you're somebody really interested in structural biology or cell biology, that discussion is not going to be about the binding pocket for serotonin on serotonin 2A receptor or a lot of the downstream signaling of the serotonin 2A receptor. We'll talk a little bit about that where it's relevant. But more importantly, at least for sake of today's discussion, we're going to talk about how the serotonin 2A receptor is really the one responsible for triggering all the changes in neural circuitry that lead to the changes. That is the improvements in mood, the relief from compulsive disorders in many cases. But really, it's the serotonin 2A receptor selectivity of psilocybin that is leading to all the excitement that you hear about in terms of psilocybin as a therapeutic tool. Let me say that from a slightly different angle. There are data that I'll talk about today which show that one, although in most cases two, psilocybin journeys done with particular dosages of psilocybin lead to maximal binding or occupancy of those serotonin 2A receptors in ways that lead to significant and unprecedented relief for major depression. In fact, you'll soon learn that the clinical trials for psilocybin are outperforming standard therapy and outperforming so-called SSRIs and various other antidepressants in terms of providing depression relief in ways that are frankly staggering, not just to me, but to the psychiatric community at large. And this is where so much of the excitement is coming from. Now, that statement could be taken one way, which is to just say, okay, well, here's a compound psilocybin that outperforms SSRIs, and therefore all the attention should be on psilocybin. But SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. In other words, the SSRIs, of which there's now a lot of controversy, things like Prozac, Zoloft, et cetera. I'm sure you've heard some of this controversy. There are people who are very pro SSRIs, although there are a growing number of people who really feel that the SSRIs are probably most appropriate for things like obsessive compulsive disorder, where they, in fact, can be very beneficial. But there's a lot of kind of leaning back from SSRIs as the be-all, end-all for the treatment of depression nowadays because of the side effect profiles. And the fact that it's not even really clear that serotonin deficiencies are the major cause of depression in the first place. Now, again, we're talking about psilocybin, not about SSRIs, but you should be thinking, wait, how is it that two molecules, psilocybin and some particular SSRI, both of which look like and or increase serotonin transmission in the brain, are leading to either incredibly positive and interesting outcomes or to kind of troubling side effect riddled outcomes? And again, it all boils back down to the selectivity of psilocybin to bind that serotonin 2A receptor. And so in order to understand how psilocybin works and in order to understand proper dosing profiles and spacing of sessions, aka journeys, we really need to talk a little bit more about the serotonin 2A receptor, where it is in the brain, what sorts of things happen when psilocybin binds the serotonin 2A receptor, and how those things set in motion the various changes, the neuroplasticity that allows people to feel better in terms of their mood, and as you'll soon learn, can experience more pleasure and joy from things like music and enhanced creativity, all the things that I do believe, whether or not people are thinking about or maybe even exploring psilocybin for recreational or therapeutic purposes, all the things that people want and are really talking about and perhaps even doing psilocybin in order to obtain.